Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a little more scatterbrain video than we normally do. Today I kind of want to show you how I look at some of these sites and how I'm making my connections and just the routes that I take when I'm comparing some of these sites from the old world to the new world, and how I'm coming to my conclusions. So today we're going to look at a few sites that are pretty famous, and then we're going to look at some other sites that you probably never heard of, and a couple of them that I think I've just found for the first time today that I don't remember ever seeing or hearing anyone talk about, not even Brian. So before I begin though, I just want to say thanks to everybody who's stuck it out with me and stayed subscribed to the channel. I've had very few people unsubscribe, and I've had very few bad comments and negative feedback. You guys have been great so far. I really appreciate all of you. And I just want to say, it's kind of nice having the channel small, to be honest, because the guys like Jimmy at Bright Insight and Matt at Ancient Architects, they have thousands of subscribers, and they get hundreds of comments in every one of their videos. And some of the comments are pretty good, but some of them are pretty generic, just fans and people with passing interests in these subjects, or maybe just people that are less educated that are just seeing some of this stuff the first time. They don't really have good insights and good feedback. They're just appreciative, which is it's nice. But I do like that we are kind of a small community still, and the people who are subscribed to me are kind of more in the know already. They've got a good grasp of the concepts we're talking about, so we can kind of go to the next level of the discussion. Say if Jimmy and Matt are the 100 levels courses in the university, we are going to try to be the 200 level, or maybe sometimes the 300 level. And that's where I think people like Chuck at CFAP 7865 and Wise Up and some of these other guys they're a little bit smaller, and SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded, also, they're all a little bit smaller, but they're going into a little bit more detail with their videos and trying to flesh out some concepts more and kind of show us their work. Some of the other videos are more polished. The other channels, the other guys, they have a nice presentation that's really finished and pretty, but it's kind of surface level when it comes to the information, and they're not really explaining things as thoroughly and getting into the details like we are. So today, let's start out at Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. So Tiahuanaco is pretty famous, and you've probably seen a lot of pictures of it before. The famous pictures of the gate and statues and the heads in the walls. We'll see that photo in a minute. But I wanted to look at this angle first because I found some interesting things about it. First of all, these horizontal slabs on top. This one, for example, has 2 nubs on it. How about that? Now that, I could say, yeah, for lifting, putting it up there. Looks like this one might have had 2 also, and perhaps this one as well. See that? That's interesting. And maybe this block back here had a couple nubs on it. Maybe that's the remnants of one. And then I believe I saw square hole anomalies over here and here. What are those about? And these extra elements here, are these after to shore up the wall? What's that? Are they covering something? I don't know. That's just interesting. The buttressing comes out. If that's original, who knows? But I find the execution down here at the bottom of these large standing stones, these megalithic blocks, and they're up here too, and they're all around the site. And they're, in this configuration, they're like fence posts, and then they're filled in with all the blocks, which is, it reminds me of Termantia in Spain. And we'll look at that in a minute and compare and contrast and just see if we notice anything interesting about them. So next we'll look, oh yeah, here we go. Here it is, Termantia. So yeah, right away, these vertical megalithic elements filled in with blocks. Just an interesting execution, right? And then one thing I kind of, it caught my eye was the staggered little triple motif here, these little holes. It's like, oh, what's that about? I know we have all these other holes here. Who knows what those are about? But these are interesting, just these 3 staggered ones. And then I think we'll go back to Tiahuanaco here. Yeah, the famous picture. And just the fact that there's the stagger in the heads down here. I find that just a funny coincidence. A lot of these things are kind of just funny coincidences, and some of them become more than coincidences after a while. But this is the famous photo, and a lot of people will tell you, oh, well, this temple's been rebuilt. This isn't how it used to look. And I'm sure there's been lots of reconfigurings of a lot of these sites, but some of this stuff would be pretty hard to undo and to put back the way that it is now. I think this is a pretty, oh, okay, it's not that big of a picture, but some of this stuff, yeah, it's got to be original, right? Especially these stones, and this gate, and these stairs. So there's a lot of, interesting elements at this site that are really impressive as well, and reminds me of some other places. How about this one? This is Ushnu, and please bear with me when I try to pronounce some of these. I've never heard these said before. Ushnu is a step pyramid. It's, supposedly Incan, but we know is pre-Incan. And in some instances, this is polygonal. It looks really molded in some instances, like the Coricancha. In other instances, we have like some nice formal blocks. You have trapezoidal elements, this entrance. It's just a very impressive structure. And, all kinds of connections can be proposed. Egyptian, other South American pyramids. Maybe even, I believe there's some islands off of Europe, off the west coast of Europe, that have some stair-step pyramids like this. The name escapes me now, but it's one of the island chains in between the Americas and Europe and Africa. But they're not nearly as impressive. They're much smaller and rubble built, but they do have a similar execution though. The large stair-step platforms. So I was looking more at this site, and I just trying to find more angles and more pictures. There's not many good large pictures for some of these sites, which is really frustrating. But I think by now we can start seeing some things even from the pictures that are available. So like here, for example, one little tiny square anomaly at the corner, and maybe another one. They're really odd how they follow us around the sites even when we're not looking for them. We're looking for other things, and those little things pop up. And like here, for example, this gap. See, that gap to me looks intended. It looks like they meant to do that. The way they carved this stone, this is like a lintel for it, and there's a little gap. And then here, a small filler stone. And there's other instances of tiny little filler stones. And it's just really odd to me. I mean, I'm sure it's for structural stability, but it's just a quirky building style. And it follows us with the formal styles and formal executions, and then these puffy, erratic, polygonal styles, they're there too. And that's why I think that there's got to be some kind of connection, because I don't think you just develop those techniques independently. And especially the shapes and the artistic motifs. So here again, this is a nice frontal view. You can see the trapezoidal door, the incised motif, as with all the other gates that we were seeing. You can see that this is not level by any means, is it? Look how it swoops away down here and perhaps goes below the surface. So there's a lot going on. I mean, there's damage maybe even. You can see part of the stairs are leaning. So this may have weathered a cataclysm. There's elements missing here for sure, right? There should be more. So this is not a complete structure, but this is a pretty intact structure, I would say. And then here's a good angle. I found something really interesting about this angle, and it reminded me of something we have seen earlier on in the list. And I'm going to jump around here in a second to get you that picture. But this is a really nice photo. It's really large. You can see other little square anomalies here. Here, that's just a stone doing that, but some of them, well, that's probably is too. Okay. So those aren't square anomalies. Those are actually just smaller stones that give that appearance. We have to make sure we discriminate. We have to make sure we're true to the evidence. But that might be. See how that stone's been carved away at the corner? And then down here, look, see how this has been carved? There's a small little filler stone. And then here, there's a corner that's been carved away. So there are square hole anomalies, but we just have to be, discriminatory when we're looking for them. Perhaps, they'd be down here where the foliage is too, perhaps. But then look at this. These two have nubs on them. That's interesting, isn't it? That's the only two, I believe, in the whole photo. And in any of the photos I've seen, those might be the only two blocks that have nubs on them. How about that? That's really interesting to me. And then I was looking at those, and then I looked down a little further, and I saw these coping stones. These look like, this is an original addition. It's not exactly part of the pyramid, I don't believe. I think it's a separate wall, like another entrance. This might be a subterranean element. But it appears to be contemporary, right? Yeah, the construction method is just as good, and the blocks appear to be of the same size and quality and everything. But it does look like it's been shaken. And this top piece, though, it's faceted. It has a left and a right facet to it. So let's pause for a second and pull up another photo where we've seen this before. Okay, man, yeah, the good thing about having that list is we can go right back to another site, but it does take a minute to scroll down. So we are back in Greece now, and this is the Arcadian Gate, and we can see, again, this trapezoidal door and window structure, tower. But look at the top again, these faceted little coping stone pieces, a left and a right facet, those little triangle pieces. So I find that to be an interesting, very similar execution. And how could that be a independently created motif? Doesn't seem possible to me. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is Juanico Marcha. And I had not heard of this site before, or if I had, maybe it was once by Brian Forrester. But I'm not familiar with much of the history of this site, or if there's many more structures here. This is one of the only nice photos I could find. I think there's only a few of these structures, of these nicely built structures left. But they appear to be the same quality and the same construction style as the rest of the stuff we've been seeing. So this may be another site to investigate, and hopefully we can get more pictures of this site soon. From the Wikipedia page, it said that it was a trading route, and that 5 or maybe more distinct cultures, or types of people, were coming through this area. So that's pretty interesting to me. Next, how about this thing? Has anyone seen this before? I don't believe I've ever seen this before. And I'm not even sure on the name. We'll see if I can find it in a second. But first, I want to point out something very unique about this wall. This is actually a 4-sided platform. But look at the coping on the top and how it's one piece and it kicks out. There is only one other culture in the world I know of that does that. Well, let's look at that for a second. These guys, the Egyptians, look at that. Now that you see it here, you go, oh yeah, I know that's an Egyptian motif. Yeah, I knew that. But isn't it odd that place in South America has the exact same motif on their structure. Look at the size and the scope of this thing. It's huge. And it's got the same swooping levels at points. And I want to point out how at the corners here, you notice how that they swoop up and then they go trapezoidal. I know of another place that does that as well. And I won't stop the video again to look, and you can go look for yourself. But a lot of bases of castles and megalithic walls in Japan do that. And I think that could very, very likely be a connection to some Japanese sites. And I've never seen this before. I think this is an Egyptian-Japanese connection right here. How about that, guys? I know that's extremely out there, but I like to think about these kind of connections. I think these could be entirely plausible. If there's trade, like we're thinking there was trade, there was shared motifs as well, shared building styles and knowledge. Had to be. Some of this stuff couldn't be coincidence. That might be a small square filler stone there. This execution's pretty good. You know, it's pretty random in terms of the dimensions of the blocks, but the rows do stay pretty straight. Every now and then you'll see a weird polygonal one, or you'll see a small narrow filler one. And I think that has to do with structural stability. Just stones that are designed maybe to crumble and fall out in the event of an earthquake and it being shaken, and the larger blocks will hold it all together. Just an idea, like for here, for example, a tiny little one, a little slender stone. And a lot of times we see square hole anomalies in walls that are like that, where it looks like a whole stone has fallen out or has been taken out or has been left out. So that's just an interesting thing to think about. Like here, for example, see how this has been rocked, but this thing stayed together. It took it like a champion, no problem. This could do it again and again. This wall is built to do that. But what was in here? Maybe these were slender stones like these, and they were designed to fall out to keep the structure together in terms of an earthquake. I know that pressure over time on top and water could force its way through and erode some of these, and they could fall out that way, and this could be settling. That's also a possibility. Okay, guys, so this is a whole complex of structures, and I guess it's known as Juanico Pampa. But I'm not sure if that smaller little village element, if that was a different name. So I'm not sure if that was what I said before, if that was correct. But I'm just gonna we will refer to this whole area as Juanico Pampa. Juanico Pampa. Yes. Okay. So again, very impressive four-sided structure with, I believe, it has to be they have to get up there some way, so that I'm going to say this is a contemporary original ramp or stairwell, just almost gone, mostly eroded. Some really impressive elements here. This is one piece of stone, this corner piece, and these faceted pieces. It's just really nice. Nicely done. And again, with this damage or settling, either way, the structure is holding together pretty well. Maybe these are some repairs that people put in. And of course, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger without ruining the quality too much. Look at this. An animal relief carving. And I'm going to say that's original with the structure. They put that on there when they built the thing. I just have a feeling with it, like with the Chulpa Towers, that this is their motif. And we're going to see on a gate in a minute that it flanks either side of the gate. And I'm assuming they're pumas. Some of them are pretty eroded and some are pretty wildly illustrated. Let's see if I can find some more pictures here. This is just a close-up of the stairwell. I don't think there's too much interesting going on in this photo. This may be, these are interesting. These may have had more going on top. It's interesting. But yeah, let's focus on this gate. Yeah, I believe that's the pyramid in the background, or more of it. Other gates. Another one just of equal quality back in the background. This isn't just one. There's multiple. But I believe in this case they're monkeys. We'll see. I think these are monkeys. So we may have multiple animals being depicted. But how do we reconcile this amazing architecture with these just simple, almost childlike depictions of animals? I mean, of course they're heavily eroded, right? So maybe in the past they looked a whole lot better. But as an artist, some of this stuff just looks, really crudely executed. But it looks like it didn't need to be that fancy, or it was made to look crude on purpose. I don't know. It's a thing I've been trying to think about in terms of the South American sites, because we really don't see any formality or any high illustrative carvings in stone until we get to much later and smaller structures like Mayan things and the Mayan pyramids and their temples. And we can look at those later, because I believe those are legacy structures, and they've got a lot going on too, like with them, and a lot of encoded motifs in them. So they've remembered a lot from whoever taught them, or from whatever they learned from these structures. But I believe some of these older structures, these bigger megalithic structures, just like Brian Forrester believes, that these are the oldest ones. And I think in some cases they're the most impressive out of all of them. But then how do we reconcile something so impressive in terms of execution of the architecture with such simplistic artistic motifs? It's almost like it was made to be chunky and simple on purpose, right? And I don't know how to reconcile that. And then we have things like this. I don't even know what this is called. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at this before. I'm thinking this is a natural outcrop of rock. I'm pretty sure. There's not many good pictures of this. But that thing up there is wild. That's just crazy up there. What's going on up at the top there? Who knows? It's more than likely a natural geological outcrop. But I bet there's some interesting archaeology going on around that thing too. I bet. Yeah, here's another photo. I find that pretty interesting. I think the quality will break down once we start to zoom in, but there's some interesting things going on up there. And who knows? This is all covered up. I don't know any kind of history about this area. And then there's this thing. I have no idea about this thing either. Where this is. It may be with the other ones that we just saw nearby. But I've never heard of this one. And let's see if we can zoom in a little bit on this one without breaking down the quality. Some of these stones are pretty impressive. Square anomaly right there. Square indentation in a stone. It may have even caused that stone to crack in half. This may have been one big stone. And there's lots of other really large stones. Like this one here. And these are all really, nicely fitted together. Finely stacked. Some of these over here might be huge, right? And who knows how much more of the structure there is. I could find only a couple other photos. This is where we just were over here. There's a whole other structure that is adjacent to it. And I don't know what's going on inside of there or what this is comprised of. I'm sure this is just small little stones, dry laid stones that are roughly hewn and stacked. But I don't know what any of that stuff in the middle is. So, and then let's move on to another site. And this is going to be an interesting connection I'm going to try to propose to you guys. This site is in Peru also. This is the Wari culture, or the Huari culture, H-U-A-R-I, or it's pronounced Wari, W-A-R-I. But Brian Forrester is the only person I've heard talk about these. And we see a lot of rubble-built structure around this stuff. But then interspersed throughout, we see these huge, finely dressed elements. And they have little notches in them, right? sometimes they're here. And I think in other instances we'll see them on the ends. But I was hunting this site down because I thought that there was bevel blocks in this location. Yeah, here you go. You can see on the ends 2 little indentations. Sometimes the lighting's got to be right. But there's a lot to the structure. Most of it's subterranean over here. It's buried. This might be original in terms of its configuration as a I think they'll call it a tomb, right? But it may be 2 separate boxes. It's hard to tell. Yeah, here you can see it. There's a little square box created, and I'm not sure if this is the original configuration, but we see other maybe boxes or other configurations where they're stacked together in the background. This one's interesting. This one has a hole in it. And then the reason why I was looking for this site was to add it to the bevel block list, because I remember this photo, and this is one bevel block, and maybe instances of one here, and over here there's a little bevel line, right? See that? So, of course, I think this is the same construction technique as the bevel blocks, just a different execution in terms of the finish, so that we don't see the bevels, like we saw at the Machu Picchu gate, which is my profile picture. So, what to make of this? These large stones interspersed with these other cruder structures, and the way, like they're lintels here, and they're not really, none of them seem pretty square. This one seems a little more level, but some of them don't. Are these reclaimed and repurposed elements? These giant rectangular finely dressed stones? They may be. This is interesting how much of this goes down to the ground too, right? How much more of this is there? So, now I want to propose... Oh yes, I also wanted to note that at this site or around this site, there are these, which are ancient pipes. They link together, right? It's a canal system. It's a drainage system or a water movement system for some purpose. Clean water or dirty water, one or the other. Irrigation or something. These were for moving water. And that's really, really impressive to me that they would take the time to do this. And I think Brian Forster has brought up more examples of this, but this is found near the Wari site. Now, I want to make a connection here at the end. Propose it to you guys at least, see what you think. We're going to go somewhere completely across the world. Grave Circle A. Grave Circle B is much less impressive. It's just a little pile of rocks, of rubble. But we are in Mycenae, Greece, and I want to take a look at some of these walls around here. These larger, finely dressed stones. Okay? So, this first picture is huge, so we're going to look at it, and we're going to, get oriented here. So, this is the Lion Gate. That's famous, right? This is the back side. The side's not carved. And that, I proposed in an earlier video. It just makes me wonder, the illustration, the carving on the opposite side, when that was done. Was that done secondarily? Was that not part of the original structure? I don't know. It's really well done. It could be original. The motifs could be original. But it's just interesting to me. Also the fact that it is a triangle above the lintel. We see that at the tomb of Atreus and those other beehive tombs. It's another classical Greek motif, an execution of a gate or an arch. So that's interesting. But anyway, let's focus on these stones. Now, what this is a giant ring of stones that goes all the way around, and then it comes back. See, these rocks in the foreground obscure the connection, but it comes around, and then behind these rocks it goes around and connects to these two little box structures. They're two little separate boxes. And this is like a little entrance into this area. So let's go back and look at some more photos. Okay, here is an old illustration of what they think it might have looked like in the past. You know, all smooth and even on top, and then this structure with stones capping the whole thing, making this, you know, a hollow area inside all the way around. Let's see, yeah, there's a different quality one. And where it's located in terms of the gate, Lion's Gate, you would come in this way, and in the lower portion, you would have this giant encircled area. Interesting, this one shows more of the depth. And then I believe there's a good picture that shows a portion that is still covered. I think this is one of the only portions that still has the top piece on it. So if these were all covered, I don't know. You know, if they all broke. I see a lot laying around. There are lots of them laying around. So that could be the case. But one thing those old illustrations don't, you know, call into question is the depth of the construction, or the excavation. So in some of these older photos, you see it's going down a decent amount, and then there's this large outcrop of rock. We'll try to get some larger photos here. In these photos, you can see it goes a lot deeper. That's about as big as we're going to get, I think. It goes a lot deeper, and this is kind of a, you know, a roughly put together wall. But then elements of the wall are nicely dressed over here, and there's some large stones in these walls behind. And these stones are pretty torn apart. They're pretty devastated. They look like broken teeth, don't they? But elements of it are still good. They're still intact, and those have the little notches in them, just like those Wari structures did. And see, here's some more square elements that are just laying around. A lot of elements may have been stolen from this site and reused, of course. It makes you wonder what all this excavation was. If it was supposed to be smooth in the past, what's all this excavation about? Is this later peoples digging this out for whatever reasons? If this is a cemetery, was this dug out to, you know, rob the tombs and rob the graves? I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. It's strange that this giant outcrop of rock is here. What was this? And one thing I like to do, guys, when I'm looking at these photos is I need to look at a lot of different photos, a lot of different angles, a lot of different time periods that these photos have been taken from. That's where people like Vlad9VT are really good, and Charles Koss and others are really good, that show you older photos and new photos to give you an idea of when they were excavated and a little bit of their history. So here, a good example, you see the older photo. Some of these stones are packed together and just used as fill. And there's a piece of something here, this outcrop. Just like over here, there's a piece of something. And then all this down here is still excavated out pretty nicely. In other instances, you see grass. So they let the grass grow back. And then in other instances, you see they've started collecting all these pieces and arranging them and organizing them and trying to figure out where they go. And they've cut back the grass some more. This is a really nice photo. This has a lot of detail to it. So it's important to look at lots of different photos to get an idea of, you know, how they're maintaining these sites, especially at places like Baalbek in that quarry. It's really nice to check back and look for more photos over time, because they're constantly digging pieces out of that thing and exposing more. Like this past year, they found that other block underneath and next to it. So there could be way more under there that we don't know about. But it is good to go through a lot of these photos and scan all of them, all the features of them. You know, try to get your bearings on them, check out the history. And you can start spotting some of this stuff too, like I am. when I started doing it, I was baffled by the fact that no one else had been doing it, because it doesn't take much. It just, now that we have Google and the way the images are, the algorithm for the images are, you can actually, sort by related images, and you can stumble upon a lot of connected sites just thanks to the algorithm of Google. So, this is, the site in question, the famous element, the Lion's Gate. Not sure if it's original or not. Maybe it is. Maybe that is an original element. And if is the carving original? And was it put in here after it was carved? Was it put in there and then carved? Was it taken from somewhere else and then put in here as an element for their thing? All these questions have to be asked, right? Who knows? Was this a piece? Was it like the beehive tombs where there was a triangular space above the lintel that was just open, and this was later added in as a filler piece? Who knows? I mean, it looks pretty tightly fitted in there, but there is some mortar around it, and does appear to be some damage around the edges. So who knows? But it is an interesting architectural stylistic motif, isn't it? These little pedestals that they're standing on, they have a nice sharp bevel and this vertical line that cuts them in half, but then you can see it doesn't go all the way through. It leaves the back. It just cuts just deep enough to make these two. And this is a really well done piece of art. I have to say, it's really well executed. So even the way that it has weathered so that the outer leg is a darker color and the inner leg stays a lighter color, that's just, man, that's really well done. They didn't, whether or not that was intended, it's just the way it happens makes it even more interesting over time, the weathering on it. But it's just a very interesting architectural motif. Interesting capital, interesting column. And this site, in general, just very interesting. A lot going on here. A lot of really large construction blocks. Just like at those beehive tombs. And I didn't realize that this little grave circle was right beyond the gate. I knew about that Lion's Gate for a long time, but I never knew that this little circle was behind it and was part of this site. Or really that these large walls, some of these megalithic walls are really impressive. I don't know how, early we can attribute them, but just the fact that they're there and the blocks that they're comprised of, some of this is really impressive to throw up there and to get it to stay. So this is just a crazy site. I know it's a lot of rubble, and it's just the fact that they're interspersed with these really nicely done stones, and they look just like those watery stones. So this is kind of how I go through these pictures and these sites and make these connections. I'm really stumbling into them. I really don't intend to find some of these connections half the time, but you guys can do it too. It doesn't take much. This is how I do it, though. Kind of a scatterbrain video today, but this is the scatterbrain process that I go through when I'm organizing my albums. So we might have to do some new albums for some of these other architectural elements. We don't have, really good grasp of what to call some of this stuff yet. But like those coping stone motifs and some of these large rectangular and square stones. There's some other sites in South America that have large, thin, square, rectangular stones standing on end like this. And they have round columns. Let's see if I can find the picture. Yeah, Chavin de Hontar. I had seen this before. I knew about this site, I believe from Brian, or maybe Hugh Newman. But this is one of the only sites that I think that I've seen that has round columns. How about that? They look very well done too. So, a lot going on in South America, guys. A lot more than anybody tells you. So, this site, also pretty big, incorporates a lot of really large, tightly fitted stones, right? Heavily eroded in areas. This is where we just were. this thing is pretty big. Pretty impressive construction. So we can go down this rabbit hole, all day long and run around the world all day long finding connections. But this is the process. This is what I go through checking these sites out. So I hope this was pretty interesting to you guys. I hope maybe it helped you get an idea of what I go through and maybe what you guys could do on your own searching. But man, some of this stuff is just really impressive to me. Even how ruined it is, it's still really impressive. So hope you guys like this. Thanks for hanging out with me, and we will talk to you next time.